Hello friends, how are you? How's your days going on? Do you know about Christopher Columbus? What he did? Why he was famous? Why Americans celebrate October 12th as a Columbus Day or national holiday? If not, okay, certainly. Here's a detailed account of Christopher Columbus's life, from his early years through his voyages and legacy. Before start, can you please subscribe my channel for my hard work to make this type of stories? Thank you.
Now let's start. Christopher Columbus was born in 1451 in the Republic of Genoa, part of modern-day Italy. His birth name was Cristoforo Colombo, and he was born to a wool weaver, Domenico Colombo, and Susanna Fontanarossa. Columbus had 4 siblings: Bartolomeo, Giovanni Pellegrino, Giacomo, Diego, and a sister named Bianchinetta.
From a young age, Columbus was exposed to the maritime culture of Genoa, one of the most active trading ports in Europe. Although he came from a modest background, he grew interested in navigation and the sea, learning reading, writing, Latin, and mathematics. He often joined trading expeditions in the Mediterranean Sea and soon began to dream of exploring further horizons. During his early years, Columbus studied geography, cartography, and astronomy.
He became fascinated by the works of explorers such as Marco Polo, who had traveled to Asia, and by the writings of Ptolemy and other ancient geographers who theorized about the world's size and shape. One significant belief that Columbus held was that the Earth was round, which was accepted by many educated people at the time, and that Asia could be reached by sailing westward from Europe, a theory that would become central to his life's mission.
During the 1480s, Columbus began to seriously pursue his dream of finding a westward route to Asia. This ambition was driven by the desire to establish a shorter and safer route to the rich lands of India and China, known for their spices, gold, and other valuable goods. At the time, European traders had to use the long and dangerous land routes to reach Asia or risk navigating around Africa, a difficult and expensive voyage.
However, Columbus's plan was revolutionary, as most navigators and scholars believed that the distances were far greater than Columbus estimated, making the trip across the Atlantic seemingly impossible. Columbus, however, underestimated the Earth's circumference, thinking that the journey westward to Asia would be much shorter than it actually was.
Columbus initially sought funding from the Portuguese monarchy under King John II. However, after several appeals, the Portuguese refused to sponsor his voyage. Discouraged but not defeated, Columbus turned to Spain. After years of persistence, Columbus secured an audience with Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, the Catholic monarchs who had united Spain. Despite some opposition from their advisors, who were skeptical of Columbus's calculations, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand finally agreed to fund the expedition in 1492 after Spain had completed its successful reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. The monarchs agreed to sponsor the voyage in exchange for a share of the wealth Columbus might discover. Columbus was promised the titles of Admiral of the Ocean Sea and Governor of the lands he discovered, and he would receive a percentage of the profits from the expedition. With this royal backing, Columbus prepared for his fateful journey. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from the Spanish port of Palos de la Frontera with 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. His crew was made up of about 90 men, including skilled sailors and experienced navigators. Their goal was to reach Asia by sailing westward across the Atlantic Ocean. The voyage was fraught with challenges. After weeks of sailing, the crew became anxious and nervous, fearing that they were lost in uncharted waters.
On October 10th, Columbus faced a near mutiny, but he managed to persuade his men to continue for just a few more days. Then, on the night of October 11, 1492, one of the lookout crew members, Rodrigo de Triana, sighted land. The following morning, Columbus and his crew landed on an island in the present-day Bahamas, which Columbus named San Salvador. Believing he had reached islands off the coast of Asia, Columbus called the native inhabitants Indians, thinking he was in the East Indies. From San Salvador, Columbus continued to explore the Caribbean, visiting several islands, including Cuba and Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. He encountered the Taino people, who were initially friendly and welcoming. Columbus noted that they were a peaceful people and saw them as potential converts to Christianity, as well as potential sources of labor for Spain. He also sought gold and other riches, but his expectations of vast wealth were not immediately met.
The Santa Maria was wrecked on Christmas Day, 1492, and Columbus had to leave some of his men behind on Hispaniola to establish the settlement of La Navidad. Columbus then returned to Spain in early 1493 with news of his discovery, bringing with him gold, spices, and a few indigenous people he had captured. Upon his return, Columbus was greeted as a hero. The Spanish monarchy was thrilled by the potential for wealth and empire building in the New World, and Columbus's success led to further exploration and colonization. Columbus made 4 voyages to the New World between 1492 and 1504, each time exploring new territories, but never reaching mainland Asia as he had originally intended. 1. Second voyage, 1493 to 1496. Columbus returned to the Caribbean with a larger fleet of 17 ships and around 1,200 men, including settlers, soldiers, and priests. He intended to establish permanent colonies and further explore the region. During this voyage, he discovered the islands of Dominica, Guadeloupe, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. However, his return to Hispaniola was met with difficulties as the settlement of La Navidad had been destroyed, and tensions arose with the local Taino population. Colonization efforts struggled due to disease, poor leadership, and mistreatment of the indigenous people. 2. Third voyage, 1498 to 1500. In 1498, Columbus explored the northern coast of South America and became the first European to see the continent. He sailed along the Orinoco River in present-day Venezuela, realizing for the first time that this was a landmass separate from the islands he had previously explored. However, upon his return to Hispaniola, Columbus found the colony in disarray. He faced mounting opposition from Spanish settlers, who complained of his harsh governance and failure to deliver the riches they had expected. Columbus was arrested by royal officials and sent back to Spain in chains in 1500. Though he was later freed and pardoned, his reputation suffered. 3. Fourth voyage, 1502 to 1504. Despite his fall from grace, Columbus embarked on a fourth and final voyage in 1502, determined to find a passage to Asia. He explored the coasts of Central America, including Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama, but again failed to find the route he sought. His fleet was battered by storms, and he was shipwrecked in Jamaica for almost a year before being rescued and returning to Spain in 1504. While Columbus returning to Spain in 1504, he was in poor health and financially ruined. His patron, Queen Isabella, died shortly after his return, and Columbus found himself largely forgotten by the Spanish court. He spent his remaining years lobbying for the restoration of his titles and wealth, but he was never fully reinstated. Christopher Columbus died on May 20, 1506, in Valladolid, Spain, at the age of 54. He was buried in Valladolid, but was later reinterred in Seville, and then moved again to the Dominican Republic before his remains were finally brought back to Seville. Christopher Columbus's voyages had a profound impact on world history, marking the beginning of European exploration and colonization of the Americas. His discovery opened the way for the exchange of goods, ideas, cultures, and peoples between the Old World, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the New World, the Americas, in what became known as the Columbian Exchange. However, Columbus's legacy is also controversial. While he is often celebrated as a great explorer who discovered the Americas, his arrival also marked the beginning of centuries of colonization, exploitation, and suffering for indigenous peoples. Columbus's own treatment of the native populations he encountered was often brutal. Under his administration, many indigenous people were enslaved, subjected to forced labor, and exposed to diseases that decimated their populations. In recent decades, many people have re-examined Columbus's legacy, particularly from the perspective of indigenous peoples and historians. In some places, Columbus Day has been replaced with Indigenous Peoples Day, recognizing the devastating effects of European colonization on native cultures. Christopher Columbus is a figure whose life and legacy are both celebrated and critiqued. While his voyages opened the door to the European exploration of the Americas, They also paved the way for the conquest and exploitation of indigenous peoples. Columbus himself was a complex figure, a determined navigator and visionary, but also a flawed leader whose actions had far-reaching consequences. Regardless of how one views him, there is no doubt that his expeditions changed the course of history, shaping the modern world in profound and lasting ways. In this way, Christopher Columbus became famous for exploring New World. And also some people says that he discovered America too. Americans celebrate October 12th as Columbus Day as a national holiday in America as well as in some other country also. Now my friends, you know who was Columbus, what he did and why he was famous for. After reading his story, I have some huge respect to his dedication and hard work. Salute to this man. If you also liked him and have some honor to this man, can you salute like I did please? Thank you. And also lastly, thank you for subscribing my channel. May the soul of Christopher Columbus bless you.